The final section of Chapter 1, From the Material to the Meaningful. To see how we can get from material principles to meaningful events, we need to look at what we actually mean when we use the expression the material world in any discussion of first principles. The words we use have a lot of built-in associations for each person who hears them, and those associations aren't always the same for everyone. If we're going to try to look carefully at the big picture, we should start by defining our terms. This will help us avoid making unwarranted assumptions. It should also help us to know exactly what we're claiming and what we're not. Next, we need to look at the implications of living in a material world. Meaning doesn't have a particular location in space and time, so we might think that there's no room in the material world to include meaning. But the principles of the material world don't logically exclude meaning. In fact, logic itself gives us a reason to look beyond material principles. To understand why, we will need to look at the nature of logical systems. Once we've established that meaning is logically possible in a material world, we can look at some preliminary evidence for meaning, focusing on current research in astronomy. What kinds of observations can we make about the world that might lead us to suspect the existence of meaning? Are there principles or events that aren't logically necessary that might be meaningful? What kind of conclusions can we reasonably draw from the nature of the world we live in? When we have some preliminary evidence for meaning, the next question will be, if everything has a material cause, how is it possible for meaning to affect anything? We may believe that we have evidence of meaning, but can we describe its method? We will look at a means by which it's possible for meaning to operate in the world. This will require a closer look at the nature of cause. We will then consider examples of meaning in action, this time concentrating on evidence from the field of biology. After that, we will look more closely at the nature of meaning in general. We will see how meaning relates to purpose and the different levels of purpose in the world. We will look at the question of how potential events gets turned into actual events. A look at one interpretation of quantum mechanics will suggest a way to understand how meaning can act at a subatomic level. Finally, we will discuss values as a source of meaning, and we will consider the ultimate source of value. So far, we've established the foundation for our argument. Choosing between apparent opposites is popular and has a long history, but it's not necessary. We shouldn't assume in advance that matter and meaning are incompatible. Now we need to look more closely at the evidence. Let's begin by trying to define precisely what we mean when we use the term the material world. Next up is Chapter 2, Defining the Material World.